What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to College Football Talk with Peter Burtonette. 1 week ago today, the Ohio State Buckeyes became national champions for the ninth time as the 2024 champions with a 34-23 win over the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. In this video of College Football Talk, I'm going to be going over their journey to the national championship and also going over some of their key players. But before I do, if you want to enjoy this video, please feel free to leave a like, consider subscribing to the channel, and turn on those post notifications so you're always up to date whenever I upload. I want to preface this video getting straight into it by saying that last Monday night was a joyous night. As a native Ohioan, born in Cleveland, Ohio, raised in the Columbus area for my high school years, definitely bleeds scarlet and gray, and was very excited to see that championship. And even from a neutral perspective, I do think it has to be said that the journey that this team went on is one that even a neutral fan can find interest and intrigue in. Things got started out pretty easy for this team. They had Akron, Western Michigan, and Marshall. Not exactly the murderer's row of opponents. As expected, they got off to a 3-0 start. Then they picked up a couple more wins against Michigan State and Iowa, kind of some dominating wins there. Those were the games where a certain freshman really started to emerge. And I think you probably know who I'm talking about, but I'm going to talk about him a little bit more later. So they're 5-0 heading into a huge 2-3 showdown in Eugene at Autzen Stadium against the Oregon Ducks. This was a game billed as the game of the year. I think it directly followed or was a couple weeks after that game between Georgia and Alabama, and I think a couple weeks ahead or right around that Georgia-Texas game, the first one during the regular season. So very much hyped up. In this game, 8 lead changes, arguably the game of the year. I think that Georgia-Alabama game is the only one that comes close. The Georgia-Texas game didn't quite live up to that billing. So this was a close game. In it, Ohio State learned some valuable lessons in clock management. They didn't really need it too much the rest of the season. There weren't a whole lot of close games, but I think in this one, the moment that we all think of is when Will Howard slides just a second too late, doesn't give Ohio State an opportunity to kick a potential game-winning field goal. So instead, it's a 32-31 loss, but kind of one of those losses where it's like, okay, we're going to learn from it. We're probably going to see these Ducks again in Indianapolis, maybe in the college football playoff too. And so we'll get them that time around. Obviously, it ended up being a little bit different. We'll get to that in a second. Then there were some survive and advance games, some close calls against both Nebraska and another top 5 opponent, Penn State. The Cornhuskers defense played phenomenally well against the Buckeyes in this game. I'd have to go back and watch the film. I don't really remember the Buckeyes kind of slipping into that run-first attitude, but I do know that they were severely limited by the Huskers. They even trailed in the fourth quarter, went ahead on a touchdown. And then obviously that Penn State game, some of the key moments in that one, end of the first half, Davis and Igbinosun getting the interception in the end zone when Penn State, wrestling it away from a Penn State receiver in what could have given Penn State, all the momentum going into halftime. Instead, it gives the Buckeyes that momentum. Both of these games also were 2 of the first goal line stands for this Buckeyes defense. They had one against Oregon too, obviously proved to not be enough in that game, but against both Nebraska and Penn State, those goal line stands were huge, especially against Penn State. I think the Nittany Lions were driving down, midway or late in the fourth quarter. The Buckeyes make a stand, stopping the Nittany Lions from inside the 5, I think, all 4 plays. They were certainly in a goal-to-go situation. 4 plays, no points, and that was the thing. Ohio State had, I think, 6 situations this year where the opponent was in a goal-to-go situation, sometimes even inside the 5 or inside the 1 or the 2. And instead of those teams scoring points in those opportunities, it actually ended up the Buckeyes would score 7. I'll get to that play in a moment here. So they cruise in a rivalry week. Then after that, they get a big win over Indiana, a moment where an electrifying defensive player made a big play on special teams, that being Caleb Downs with a punt return touchdown. It's a 38-15 win. Expectations are climbing for this Ohio State team. I mean, they were already high heading into the preseason, but we're looking, 10-1, rolling in a rivalry week, hosting the Michigan Wolverines, who are only at 6-5. We're going to roll over them. We're going to head to the Big Ten championship game against Oregon. Then, boom, splat. Buckeyes crushed by the Wolverines. It was a 13-10 crushing defeat to Michigan. And it was a case of kind of falling into Ryan Day and Chip Kelly, this non-aggressive, this almost like a hand tied behind your back approach to play calling, where they were just trying to run the ball. They were super conservative with it. Jeremiah Smith was extremely limited. That is down to Michigan's defense, but it's not like Will Johnson was out there. So it was just overall a disappointing result, and it was one of those losses where the seat got really hot for Ryan Day. And we know, based on stories that have come out in the days and weeks since, that a lot of the reaction, or a sizable chunk, probably most of the reaction wasn't terrible, but we do know that some of the reaction was just downright awful and honestly gross. And that is not warranted for any coach, whether it's Ryan Day losing to a rival or whether it's Mike Norvell going 2-10 at Florida State. Whatever side of the coin or the extremes, there's no room in college football for that. So, Buckeyes then hold a players-only meeting where the players were able to voice their own frustrations. Coach Day was in the meeting as well. And so, a lot of intensity in that meeting is what we've heard, and a lot of honesty, a lot of honest, hard truths were spoken. And that was a moment after that Michigan game where this team could kind of turn inward and just kind of beat themselves up and be like, oh, what happened? Our season's over. Or they could face that right in the face, right down the barrel, and they could be like, no, we're going to do what we set out to do, what we said before the season, natty or bust, and we're going to play like that. And that's exactly what they did. One more thing, quickly. I think what the Buckeyes ended up doing this year and what Michigan did last year shows the cyclical nature of the game. And what I mean by that briefly is when one team is really succeeding, it motivates the other to go out there and excel. For Michigan, seeing the Buckeyes win the 2014 national championship, then they literally right after that go out and hire Jim Harbaugh, and he starts coaching in 2015. He builds that program, and they go win a championship. Then a little bit quicker, Ohio State sees Michigan win the national title in 2023 and says, we're going to go out there in that transfer portal, and we're going to bring all these guys back, all these seniors, and we're going to go out there and win the title. That is why I think this rivalry is the best in college football. You do see it a little bit with Alabama-Auburn. You look at Auburn winning in 2010, right in the middle of Alabama's 3 titles in 2009, 2011, and 2012. And even Auburn then getting to the national championship and winning that amazing kick-6 game over Alabama in 2013. But I don't think Auburn quite matches Alabama. Yes, Ohio State is behind Michigan both in national championships, all-time wins, and in rivalry matchups, but they're a lot more on even footing than Alabama-Auburn. Kind of a bit of a tangent there. If you want me to go more in-depth on just the cyclical nature of it, how these teams respond to each other, let me know in the comments below. But shifting gears now into that college football playoff run, it started out with dominance against Tennessee that I think was actually kind of catapulted by an early face mask call. It was 3rd down. Will Howard was sacked by the Tennessee defense, but a face mask was called that allowed that first drive to survive. And the Buckeyes then, a couple plays later, long bomb over the top to Jeremiah Smith. They go on an offensive push to go up 21-0, made some good adjustments, and won a dominant game in the first December game, the first playoff game at the Shoe at Ohio Stadium to advance to the Rose Bowl. And this is where they get those Oregon Ducks. The number 1 team in the country, the team with a lot of expectations. I think maybe there was a little bit of expectations that this game would be very similar. I think I would say very much expected to be similar to that first meeting, but Ohio State was dominant from the start. They go up 34-0 on the Ducks. It was kind of a combination of Jeremiah Smith, the wide receiver phenom, Travion Henderson, and Emeka Ibuka. Those 3 guys really made the big plays, and obviously Will Howard getting the ball to both of those receivers. And once they went up 34-0, yes, Oregon got 8 points to end the half. They went up to 15 then, but really from there, the game was over at that point, and it was just a matter of playing out the final 30 minutes after going in at halftime 34-8 up. So a big win, redemption too. That's what kind of makes the lone blemish on this season really that loss to Michigan, because they avenged the loss to Oregon in dominant fashion, 41-21 win to get to the college football playoff semifinals at the Cotton Bowl. In that Cotton Bowl, they really were able to answer Texas's punches. And I guess I would say punch backs, because Ohio State would kind of make that first punch. They get the opening drive touchdown, Quinshon Judkins, I think, was the one who punched it in. And then Texas eventually, late in the first half, gets their response. But then right away, Travion Henderson goes 75 yards on a house call, perfectly called by Chris Fowler, and the Buckeyes go up by a touchdown at the break when it looked like they would just go into halftime with like 30 seconds left. Then Texas does respond, and then again, a big play by the Buckeyes. Will Howard running the ball on 4th and 2 or 3. Tim Tebow calling it that Chip Kelly would go with a quarterback run there on the ESPN2 Pat McAfee broadcast, and they get it. He gets tackled by the Turf Monster, a moment that was referenced at Sunday's Ohio State Championship celebration. And eventually, though, it allows them to get some more time off the clock, and Judkins punches the ball in the end zone again. Then we all know what happened next. This was the ultimate goal line stand of goal line stands this season. Texas gets the ball after a couple big plays by Gunnar Helm and Matthew Golden, found by Quinn Ewers. They then, a couple pass interference penalties, gets the ball down to the 1 yard line. And then it's the defensive tackles, Tyleik Williams and Ty Hamilton, who get the stuff, along, I think, with JT Tuimoloau. Then the second down pitch, obviously in retrospect an ill-advised play call, but what seemed right in the moment to try to string out that Buckeyes defense. But they got there. Caleb Downs slowed down the ball carrier, and then Lathan Ransom finished the play. Third down, Jack Sawyer gets the tip of the line of scrimmage, and then fourth down, it's the play that will go down, I think, more than any other play in this championship run in Buckeye lore, the Captain Jack Sawyer scoop and score. A moment that was shades of Ezekiel Elliott's. I mean, it was 80-plus yards against an SEC team to go up by 2 scores late and kind of solidify that win to advance to the championship game. Then, in that national championship game, it was back to what the Buckeyes had done in the first 2 playoff games. Absolute dominance from the start. It was a great game for Quinshon Judkins. He had 3 total touchdowns, couple rushing, 1 receiving, and Jeremiah Smith on a play that Alabama had run against the Buckeyes in the 2020 championship game opened the scoring. And yes, Notre Dame pushed back. They made things really interesting in that second half. They get the touchdown and the 2-point conversion, make it 31-15. Then they elect to kick a field goal. I think it's tough to nitpick that because you can see it from both sides. For one, why don't you just go for that touchdown? You need a touchdown and a 2-point conversion, 2 of those, to try to tie this game. But on the other side of the coin, it's 4th and goal from the 9. You know the Buckeyes' goal line defense is the best in the country. You think it's a pretty easy field goal there. But Mitch Jeter, who I think was maybe a little bit overhyped because of his clutch kicks, was actually worse efficiency-wise than Jaden Fielding for Ohio State. So they missed that. They do end up then scoring with about 4 minutes left. Then Ohio State goes back down the field. 3rd and 11, we all know this play now. Will Howard throws it up one-on-one coverage to Jeremiah Smith. He pulls it down, makes I think the key play of this championship game, and Jaden Fielding then converts the field goal to go up by 2 scores with very little time left. So, and that then delivers the final nail in the coffin, and Ohio State its 9th national championship. So I've mentioned a lot of names already, but who were the guys that made up this team? Who were the 2024 Ohio State Buckeyes? First of all, starting off with the quarterback, it's Will Howard, the Kansas State transfer turned tactician. He was really great throughout the entire season. There weren't really any moments during the season where I questioned whether he would be able to deliver. I know before the season I kind of did, and maybe a little bit, I guess, after the Oregon game, I was like, is this the guy that can actually get it done for Ohio State? You know, we've got all the pieces around him, but can he get it done? I think as the playoffs went on, he just proved himself further and further. I think the Michigan game also, but I wonder if he was dealing with some sort of concussion or injury in that game. He delivers in the biggest games of the season, kind of proves his doubters wrong. The running backs, Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, kind of the perfect backfield pairing between the preacher and the trash talker. It's pretty accurate, too. You know, Quinshon Judkins is kind of, I mean, they're both fiery in their own way, but he's the more fiery guy. He's going to be in your face and all like that. And Travion Henderson is the guy who's going to, pick you up even if you're the opponent when you're down. You know, he had that one play against Texas that drew the penalty, but he redeemed himself after that with the big touchdown. Wide receivers, I think, it's easy to start with Jeremiah Smith, but I want to talk about Emeka Egbuka. This guy is the, I think, all-time leader in receptions at Ohio State now. He's up there in yards, I think, second. He also is just an all-around leader who has been a massive piece of this Buckeyes team. Then kind of some of the other guys who have stuck around through this whole run. Carnell Tate, he's coming back next year. He's been here for a couple years already. G. Scott, the tight end, who is also a spiritual and also a servant leader for this team. He had a great answer to a question asked by Holly Rowe. Brandon Innes, and then, of course, yes, the superstar freshman wide receiver, Jeremiah Smith, who I think, I'll talk about this more in my way too early, top 12 for the 2025 season. That'll be my next video about how he is not only the best receiver in the country next year, but arguably the best offensive player in the country, and he will be a contender for the Heisman Trophy next year. Put that down in writing. And then the offensive line, this was the unit that made the biggest adjustments all season. You've got Donovan Jackson making a huge move, a difficult move from left guard to left tackle when Josh Simmons went out with an injury. I mean, yes, the basics of it are the same. You're trying to block and protect the quarterback and create holes for the running back. But it is a totally different game going from the guard position to the tackle position. And so that was a huge adjustment for him. Some of the other guys on the line, Luke Montgomery, Carson Hinsman, Tegra Shabola, and Josh Fryer. Of course, also the center, Seth McLaughlin, the Alabama transfer who went out with an injury. He was big for us early in the season while he played, and I'm sure a leader in that locker room as well, even when he was out. So those are some of the key guys. I think Austin Siereveld was also a guy who got some significant playing time. Then shifting gears over the defense, it obviously starts with Jack Sawyer, the all-star Pickerington North kid from the Columbus area, grew up a Buckeye fan. His article, One More and Then Forever in the Players Tribune was an awesome read. As a Buckeye fan, having grown up in Columbus, relatable. Obviously not relatable in the sense of playing college football at that level, but certainly from that perspective, it was very relatable. So that was an awesome article. He was an awesome player. He paired with JT Tuimoloau, who had big moments before. He had that big game against Penn State a couple years ago, but up until this playoff run, both of these guys had kind of been without their key play. He made some big ones. Him and Captain Jack combined for 10 sacks in the first 3 college football playoff games, and he also made a couple of key plays in the national championship game. Mentioned the defensive tackles, Ty Hamilton and Tyleik Williams. This team would not have been as strong at the goal line without these two. They were huge in stopping the run, plugging those holes right in the middle, and they were incredible pieces. At linebacker, you've got the Block O, the 0 jersey, Cody Simon, and the guy who's probably going to follow him coming back for another season, Sonny Styles. Both of those two guys paired brilliantly. Cody Simon was the defensive MVP of both the Rose Bowl and the championship game, and Sonny Styles made a few key plays as well. I think, trying to remember if he sacked Dylan Gabriel or Quinn Ewers in one of those 2 games, but he was huge throughout. Cornerbacks, Denzel Burke and Davison Igbinosun. Igbinosun's coming back. He'll have to work on some things with his pass interference. I think he was one of, if not the most penalized defensive back in college football. So that's one thing he'll have to improve. But he had some big plays. I mentioned that interception at the end of the first half against Penn State. Denzel Burke doesn't get a lot of attention, and that's probably, for a cornerback, one of the best signs. You're either getting a lot of attention for 2 reasons. One's good, you're making interceptions or getting obvious pass breakups, or 2, you're getting burned or you're getting penalized. Denzel Burke was the type of cornerback who just kind of helps to shut down that number 1 target, and he was a huge part of the Buckeyes' success. Then the safeties, Jordan Hancock and Lathan Ransom, both 2 mainstays of this Buckeyes defense, made some huge plays. I mentioned Ransom, and Hancock was just the dependable safety. And then, of course, free safety, Caleb Downs. He is, like Smith, I think, not only going to be the best at his position next year, but I think he's probably the best defensive player in college football. So Ohio State, looking ahead, laying the foundation with the best offensive player and the best defensive player, or at the very least, the best wide receiver and the best DB, is a pretty good starting point for trying to defend the title. But Caleb Downs made huge plays. He got that interception to seal the Cotton Bowl win. Buckeyes were already up 2 scores, but kind of a fitting moment for him to have a big play like that, and just a phenomenal player that's so intelligent when he's out there, and he's a hard hitter, and he's driven. He's a fun player to watch, and I'm glad the Buckeyes were able to scoop him up from Alabama. finally, looking at some of the coaches and their stories, for one, starting with Ryan Day, it is redemption for Ryan Day. This is a guy who was frankly hated by a good chunk of Buckeye Nation, or at least, wanting to be shown out the door after that Michigan loss. And he kept his head down and kept working. He had a brilliant support staff with, this team and obviously his family that was able to get him through that. And ultimately, I think it's partially his own will, and I imagine also based on how he talks about the faith of this team, perhaps his dependence on God too. So he gets redemption. Chip Kelly was also captivating. He had those moments where it was a little bit questionable, especially that Michigan game, maybe a little bit against Nebraska and Penn State. But he dialed up some really good play calls in the college football playoff, and just led this Ohio State offense to, one of the most productive college football playoff runs ever. And Jim Knowles, he's unfortunately on his way out the door. It's kind of a head-scratching move. You'd expect if he went out the door, it would have been for a head coaching job. But I know he has Pennsylvania ties. I think he's from Philadelphia. So, and I believe also Penn State was offering more money. But ultimately, unless he goes to Penn State and wins 2 or more national titles, he brought the Buckeyes one. He's free to go and do, whatever he wants. He will be a Buckeye, legend for what he achieved with this defense. I mean, it was a defense that was kind of struggling a few years ago now. You think of those games against Iowa and Purdue where we just got lit up, Alabama in the national championship game, even how Michigan just ran us over for a couple of years. This year, he put this team into status as the number 1 defense in the country. That's proven by statistics and also by what you see on the field. So he turned around a unit that had its issues, were allowing so many big plays, and turned them into the best defense in college football. So for that, he will always be an Ohio State Buckeye. So that's all for this video. What an incredible season for this Ohio State team. The 2024 Ohio State Buckeyes will forever be national champions. But that is all for this episode of College Football Talk. Again, my next video will be kind of a look ahead to next season, giving my way too early top 12, kind of going over the teams that I think are the top contenders, and then some of their teams who are on the rise or maybe who are dipping down. But thank you so much for taking the time to watch College Football Talk. I'm your host, Peter Burnett, signing out. Peace.